Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is David Ellison, and I'm going to talk to you this afternoon about a brand new apprentice scheme for service engineers working with forklift trucks. Before I go into the detail of the scheme itself, I think I need to introduce the problem, which is not peculiar to the forklift truck industry, but is one that we feel quite acutely. If you look on this particular slide, you'll see in the middle there, under the 41 to 50 year age group, something like 1,500 engineers operating in a number of companies across the country. Taking that same number of companies, if you look to the left, where you see in the 21 to 30 year age group, there are less than half that number of engineers actually out there working at the moment. And just to the left of that, where you've got the 16 to 20 year group, which could be potentially the apprentices that we're talking about, you haven't even got half of the 716. And therefore, as you work that whole system through, you'll see that in 10 or 20 years' time, long after I've left the industry, there are not going to be enough engineers out there to service the requirements of the trucks. And the trucks themselves, although they keep changing technically, the technology is not going to change that much that service engineers are not going to be required. So that really is the problem, and that's why we need to focus again on the provision of service engineers. As a trade association, we have quite a lot of experience. We've worked with North Warwickshire and Hinckley College, a local college to here, tried to increase the number of apprentices, but as soon as we pushed out nationally, we found that they couldn't cope with the assessment criteria inherent in the modern apprentice scheme. We also started working more recently with City of Bristol College, and through them with a facility in Carlisle, hoping that by having 3 or 4 centres around the country that we'd be able to increase the uptake. But that wasn't to work either. And then on top of that, we find that the government, although they have been particularly vocal in terms of what they're doing for apprentices, have actually been quite difficult for a small organisation such as ours. The funding has been inconsistent and very difficult to understand, and certainly if you want to put out a cohesive national programme, it is almost impossible to do that using the current funding schemes. The systems themselves are far too bureaucratic and so unresponsive that it may take 2 years to get a small change into an apprentice program, which when you're working in a technology-based industry, which the fork truck industry is, it means you're not keeping up with what's going on, and that's not right for the employer or for the apprentice. And through that, really the system's not been able to deal with the small sectors such as ourselves. And there are a number of other issues as far as the small sectors are concerned. We do need centralised training because there aren't enough instructors out there to give the detailed training that is needed for fork truck service engineers. But that then means extra costs for the employers, because if you have a central location, all the apprentices for their 8 weeks or 10 weeks of training need to travel, they need to be accommodated, and they need to be administered whilst they're away from home. 16-year-olds, by and large, are reluctant to leave home for a number of reasons. They don't want to be away from mum and dad in some instances. More importantly, perhaps they don't want to get away from their girlfriend. They might be in a soccer team. They've got their friends, and they don't want to spend a large part of time away from home. And it works the other way as well, because with 16-year-olds, quite often the parents are not that keen that their young 16-year-old should be travelling halfway across the country on their own, perhaps the first time they've ever left home on their own. This all that makes a break as far as trying to run a centralised system. And going back to what I said before, there's then the lack of central funding, which makes the whole thing extremely difficult to administer if you're a single provider.